Well, hello, my name's Louise Savage. An extremely warm welcome back if you are a returning viewer, and an equally warm welcome if you are visiting my channel for the very first time. Lovely to see you. So a few weeks ago now, I put out a video where I explored the females in fiction that had really intrigued and interested me, and who had, in large part, depending on when I read the book, stood the test of time. And so now in this video, I want to explore my final 5 in reverse order. And again, you know, it's interesting reflecting on this. It really surprised me. So some of the women that I picked last time, there was resilience, there was bravery, there was persistence, there was perception. So I'm wondering, you know, it's going to be interesting to share the characteristics and qualities of the females that I've chosen for my last 5. What I didn't do, I realised, was talk about the females that probably shaped my reading very early on. People like, you know, characters like Jo March and Anne of Green Gables. I think I've sort of talked about those characters before, and you know, when I think I did a sort of a video about nostalgic reading or something along those lines, or the books that influenced me. I can't remember. So I didn't really want to tread on that territory too much, because I don't like to repeat content too much either. So anyway, so the first of the final 5, so book number 5, is Sue Trinder, who is the key character in Sarah Waters' Fingersmith. Now, I read this book years and years ago now. I reckon it's probably about 20 years ago. I could be wrong because I can't remember when it was published. But the character of Sue Trinder absolutely blew me away. And like many of the characters I've chosen, she is by no means perfect. She's deeply flawed. She's grown up in Victorian England, in Victorian London specifically, and she grows up in a family that would not look out of place in Oliver Twist. She's under the control of a very sort of Fagin-esque characters. And she has been taught to, you know, pinch things, thieve things. She's very light on her feet. She's very light-fingered. And she's being groomed, really, for crime. Now, that doesn't sound, does it, like the makings of a fabulous female necessarily. But what I really love is that it's her voice that we hear through the story. And she is examining, you know, her own story. And the voice is so fresh, and she's so full of life. She's a really vibrant character. She's always on the move. She's always looking at things. Anyway, she's selected to go and do this kind of Victorian hoax, I suppose. She's chosen as the young girl who's going to go with a gentleman to try and seduce this young heiress who lives out in the country. So young Sue is sent to this completely other place to her. You know, she's grown up with all the hustle and bustle of London life, and she goes to this very sleepy, rural, massive, rambling mansion. And she is to play the role of a maidservant, which, of course, again, you know, she's got to rely on her wit. She's a very shrewd, very intelligent, very sharp character. And, you know, she plays this role. It has its ups and downs. But what's wonderful is she also then develops a relationship with Maud, who is the character that they're supposed to be duping. And from that point onwards, her loyalty's tested, her resilience is tested. Again, this is a novel where it would be very easy to give spoilers, so I'm going to shut up any moment now talking about her. But I love her for her vibrance and her vivacity and her passion and her anger and all of those qualities. Again, she's a very physical, very passionate character, and she has really stayed with me over all these years. So I highly commend her to you. If you haven't read Fingersmith, I think it is probably one of my favourite certainly one of my favourite historical novels of all time, if I can categorise it like that. And then number 4 was quite a surprise to me. Isn't it interesting when you start to look at your bookshelves and you start to reflect on your reading? The characters that stay with you aren't necessarily the ones that you might expect. So this character is actually Maud from Elizabeth is Missing by Emma Healy. And this novel definitely has, I think Fingersmith might have been made into a film or TV series. And do you know what? I don't think I've watched it, which is a real shame. I need to get onto that. I'm going to have a look later. But Elizabeth is Missing was made into a film, and Glenda Jackson plays the character of Maud. So Maud is an elderly lady. She is suffering from the onset of dementia, and she is absolutely convinced that her friend Elizabeth, who usually meets her by the Salvation Army shop and fails to turn up on this particular week, and she's absolutely convinced that Elizabeth has gone missing, and she takes it upon herself, because nobody else seems to believe her, she takes it upon herself to try and unravel the mystery of where Elizabeth is. And prime suspect, I think, if I remember rightly, is Elizabeth's son Peter. And Maud certainly, you know, becomes quite an irritant to him because of her persistent questioning. And you can imagine that, can't you? You can see how this, you know, this elderly lady who's apparently losing her marbles, as we like to say, has this real conviction that something's happened to her friend. And it leads her into all sorts of bother. But what I absolutely love is the way that Maud does not allow anyone to put her off solving this problem that she sees. And her persistence when everyone around her is really concerned about her behaviour, I think is fantastic. And Maud has managed to create a family who, you know, she's got a daughter and a granddaughter who visit her regularly, who look after her. You know, she's you know, I really admire her for that. She is being looked after and cared for and noticed by those, you know, that she's brought into the world. And I love the way that Emma Healy sort of allows that to happen in the novel. So and she uses, so she has been trying to cope with her memory fading by writing herself notes and leaving herself reminders and reminding herself of what she's been doing on day to day. So she uses all the kind of, you know, she's really resourceful. She's come across all these different ways to try and help herself get herself through every day. And when Elizabeth goes missing, she starts to use these reminders as a way of collecting information. She goes back and looks, and she thinks about her normal routine, and she works out when she last saw Elizabeth. So she's, yeah, it's her resourcefulness as well that I think is really well portrayed in this story. And the wonderful thing is that Elizabeth is not the only mystery. So as the novel progresses, and this isn't a spoiler to tell you this because it happens reasonably early on, there is also a mystery around Maud's sister Suki, who also went missing. And this is something that Maud has kind of forgotten about. And gradually, the story of Suki's disappearance begins to emerge and becomes increasingly sinister. And I love the way that this novel looks at it makes us think about, I think, how there are people in society who it's very, very easy to overlook. I think we really often, you know, we dumb down the elderly. We overlook them. We don't take them seriously. And this novel really looks at how important it is to actually take notice of the older people in our communities. So Maud, you have my vote. You've come in at number 4. Go Maud is all I can say. And then next up, and I suppose possibly, I don't know, in my head she might have come higher up my list, but still in the top 3 is Agnes from Hamnet. So Agnes is the wife of Shakespeare. This is Maggie Farrell's novel that won the Women's Prize for Fiction 2-3 years ago. And Agnes is an extraordinary, I think her portrayal of Agnes, well, as you can see, is one of my favourite portrayals of any human in literature. And again, what Maggie has done is she's given voice, she's given character to Shakespeare's wife. We all know who Shakespeare is. Actually, we don't know very much really about his life either. But what Maggie O'Farrell conveys so well in the novel is how the absence of somebody can really, really affect someone else. So, you know, Agnes is the mother of twins, and she is, you know, she's trying to bring her children up. Her husband is largely absent, and yet his presence is everywhere. And there's a lot of sort of time switching and time shifting in this novel. So we see the first encounter between Agnes and Shakespeare, and we're given to understand how the relationship develops. But what I really, really love about her is that she's got this kind of really ethereal, really otherworldly quality. She wouldn't look out of place in the Boudica novel that I talked about in the previous video about fabulous women, because there is something really deeply and intensely spiritual and passionate and still, you know, there's a stillness to Agnes and a defiance, and she doesn't quite fit in. There's an extraordinary quality to her, which rather than rejecting, which would be the easiest thing for Agnes to do, is she embraces it. So I think what I love about her as a female in fiction is that she allows herself to be truly herself. She doesn't allow convention. You know, she's surrounded by elders who often really criticize her behavior and you know, don't like her approach to various sort of social conventions. But Agnes throughout it stays true to herself in a time and a space where that was very, very difficult to do. And I think that makes her a really good role model. And I think that's true of you know, all these women that I've talked about are probably women who I feel, you know, as a young woman, if I were living my life again, I would be taking an awful lot of solace and an awful lot of note of what these women are doing in these different fictional situations to help me understand the sort of woman that I might want to become. So, and the other thing about Agnes is her capacity to love. You know, her son, Hamnet, who the novel is about, he gets the plague, and her capacity for grief and the way and love and passion and the way that is described in this novel are absolutely exceptional. And really, really, you know, chimed with me. And clearly, you know, I know that this is a much, much, much loved novel. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's read it and not really, really loved it. So that's interesting. If you are somebody who's not a fan of this, I'd love to know, because I don't think I've come across anyone who isn't. And I'm not going to judge, because I think, you know, I think reading is such an individual thing, and we all get different things. You know, reading, when you're reading a novel, it's a conversation between you personally and the author, and nobody has a right to judge, you know, how you feel about that. So I'm not, you know, I'm just curious. If you didn't like it, I'd be really curious to know why. Maybe I could imagine you might, you know, somebody might read this and it might all be a bit too raw, perhaps. I don't know. So coming in at number 2 is a heroine who, no, heroine isn't the right word, but a fabulous female. I deliberately didn't use that word. A fabulous female who came into my life through the wonderful, wonderful Radio 4. I'm a massive, massive fan of radio. And this is years ago. In fact, I think I'm going to sneak a peek. I think this was probably published in the early 2000s, and I could be really wrong. Yeah, first published 2001, so it would have been 2001. And this wonderful woman came on the radio to talk about her novel, and I was just completely blown away. And I, at that point, didn't really know anything about the wonderful Bernadine Evaristo. But the way she talked about, I think when she wrote the novel, she was on some sort of sabbatical or sponsorship or some fellowship, I don't know, with the Museum of London, which if you ever get a chance to go is a fantastic museum. I haven't been for years, but I really ought to go back because I know, you know, it's just superb. And the Museum of London has quite a lot of artifacts, and actually I think, if I remember rightly, part of it is built over some old Roman foundations. And so she was obviously had the museum's collection at her disposal and was producing poetry as a result of this. So this novel, The Emperor's Babe, is written in poetic form. Do not let that put you off. It is absolutely, I found it unputdownable. I really, really loved this book. And even though I've really enjoyed other novels of Bernadine's, you know, I mean, like Girl, Woman, Other, what an amazing book. But to me, this one will probably always be closest to my heart, because Zuleika, the fabulous female at the centre of this story, she's of Sudanese, her parents are Sudanese. They've managed to make their way in the world. And what this novel does is it restores the idea that there were, you know, Roman London was not white. There were plenty and plenty of people from all sorts of parts of the world living in London and other parts of the Roman world. I mean, we know the same is true of Hadrian's Wall as well. So there were people from all sorts of places living in London, and Bernadine has restored, you know, that I will never forget that as a result of reading this novel. I mean, I knew it anyway, but it's really planted it in my head. So Zuleika, her parents are Sudanese. They've made a really good living, and what that means is that she marries a reasonably quite a wealthy Roman, and he is way older than her. It's really unpleasant, but the great thing is that he's never around. He's always, because he's important and he's wealthy, he's always traveling elsewhere. So Zuleika has plenty of time to get bored and plenty of time to go off on all these amazing explorations of London society and London culture with her two friends, Albert and Venus. Venus is a transvestite, and it's just she's vivacious, she's cheeky, she's coquettish, she's driven, she's, oh my goodness, I just, yeah, she just fills me with life when I read about her. And she actually has an affair with Septimius Severus, who was the Roman emperor at the time, and he was visiting London. And he has this, you know, Bernadine creates this affair that the two of them have. And oh, it's just such a refreshing, you know, if you're feeling a bit low and you need something really quirky and different to read that's going to fill you. It's so sensuous, this novel. It's just full of sounds and smells, and you know, she makes Roman London really, really contemporary in it. And she does that through this really fantastic, I've written sassy on the back here because that is exactly the word that I would use to describe her. So she is quite a different, in some ways, quite different to the other fabulous females that I've chosen. But it's her sassiness and her grit and her cheekiness and her cleverness and her tongue. She's got a sharp tongue, that really, really have built my affection for this character. So that's number 2. And I'm really fascinated by this myself. I don't know if anyone's predicted this, but my favourite fabulous female actually is this character. It's the girl with the louding voice. Now, when I read this book, people had been banging on about it and raving about it. And sometimes I find that a little bit off-putting. Sometimes I don't quite want to join the party because I need to sort of let the hype isn't the right word, the excitement around a book die down a little bit before I have a look at it myself. And Simon, my son of Savage Reads, was getting really impatient with me because he very generously gave me a copy of this book and said, "Mum, it's brilliant, read it, read it, read it." And I just didn't for ages and ages and ages. And then, of course, when I did read it, I felt like an idiot. But I absolutely adore the character of Adoni, who is the young girl in this novel. So the novel is, Abidare is a Nigerian writer. Or she's of Nigerian heritage. She sets the novel in Nigeria, and Adoni is a young Nigerian girl who's growing up in awful circumstances. Her mother dies, and her father is really just totally dysfunctional, and all he's interested in is money and survival. And so he basically sells Adoni off to a much older husband who's already got several wives already, and her life is made so miserable by these other women. It's really hard to read, but through that, her voice is so, she's this fantastic mixture of innocence and kind of intelligence. You know, again, she notices everything. She doesn't miss a beat. She absorbs everything around her, and she's determined and fighting to survive even when things are really hard. And you know, the story is told through her eyes, and there's such a freshness to her voice and her experience of the world. And there's you know, the world, even when it's, you know, at its most hideous, she is observing everything. And I absolutely love that. And the thing that really charmed me about Adoni is that she manages to survive in this very harsh rural community, in this awful situation. And then, and I hope this isn't going to spoil it for anyone, but her story then translates over to Lagos, and she becomes a domestic in a Lagos household. So she's so adaptable. That's what I love about her. She's so adaptable, and she's so perceptive that she managed to survive against all the odds in these really harsh circumstances in rural Nigeria. But when she's transported to the city, in an extremely different community, and she's got to learn a whole new way of living in a house with all sorts of amenities that she's never had or seen before, and with a very forceful female, I want to say owner, but she's not a slave. She's in theory, and she sort of, you know, she manages to hold on. So again, it's her inventiveness, it's her adaptability, it's her sort of sense of hope. You know, there's always this nugget of hope that I really admire in her. I think she's an outstanding, fabulous female. And I have the sequel to this, which I haven't yet read, but I'm really looking forward to reading it, and hopefully we'll get around to reading it very soon. I am not going to let that one stew on the bookshelves for a year or two. That is not happening. So there you go, Adoni, you are my fabulous female number one. And I hope you enjoyed those two videos. As ever, if you've got any other thoughts about things you would like me to bash on about, or should I say muse over, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to know who your top fabulous females are in literature. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from you all very soon. Take care, everyone. Bye.